So, the first deck tech, or just deck I've built since a certain stuff has been going on, one I've chosen is Meren of Clan Neltoth. Not the most creative or original commander, but I've been playing since far before the original version of her was released, and she was one of the first commander decks I bought. So there's a lot of nostalgia here. For those wondering, she is 2 and the Golgari for a 3/4 human shaman that whenever another creature dies, you get an experience counter, and then at the beginning of your end step, you get to choose any creature card in your graveyard, and you put it into your hand, but if it has converted mana cost equal to the number of experience counters, it just goes straight onto the battlefield. So the idea of this deck is it's generally going to be a aristocratic reanimation. It's the whole idea of the deck. So first is the mana ramp. We got Elves of Deep Shadow. The reason this is good is because Lantern Elves is great and all, but if you're hurting for black mana, this is going to accelerate you because you've already got access to the green, so this gives you access to both, and it's well worth that 1 damage. Soul Ring, because you can get her out on turn 2 if you're playing Soul Ring. So this is one of the decks where Soul Ring absolutely shines. Sakura Tribe Elder. This card sacrifices itself and you get a land. Everything we want in ramp. Mind Stone. Simple 2-mana artifact. Can sacrifice itself later to draw cards, and later on you'll see that Delirium is occasionally helpful. Devoted Druid. This is secretly one of the best cards in the deck because along with this and a certain couple of other combo pieces, this can create infinite mana. Plus, it essentially can pseudo-sacrifice itself to itself. So, that's always good. You need early experience counters. Yavimaya Elder searches you 2 basics, just all around good. It sacrifices itself to draw you a card. Nothing more that needs to be said there. Early sacrifices. Kodama's Reach. One of the few mana ramp cards that isn't a creature, but this one's just too good to ignore. Time-tested classic. Burnished Heart. Another self-sacrificing creature that ramps you. Of course, Solemn Simulacrum. Searches you basics. When it dies, draw a card. So we're going to want to be sacrificing some things, getting them into the graveyard. I've only included 4 here, but that's all we really need. We got Carrion Feeder, Viscera Seer, both 1-drops that sacrifice other creatures. Perfect. The reason I went for Phyrexian Altar in this deck over Ashnod's Altar is because I find more often I'm going to need access to colored mana rather than just colorless. Although you could use Ashnod's Altar in this place just as easily. And then a new favorite of mine, Woe Strider. Sacrificing another creature to scry one, just like Viscera Seer, but the difference is this guy comes in with his own token, and you can cast him on later on from the graveyard. Once things are sacrificed, we're going to need a way to bring them back. That's why I'm including Phyrexian Delver. This is fantastic with Meren, because if you can bring him back with Meren, he enters the battlefield and you literally just reanimate a creature from your graveyard. So you can get 2 for the price of 1, or in some situations cheat on the reanimation process. Eternal Witness, another commander classic. This one gets us back any instants of sorceries or artifacts or whatever we may need from the graveyard. Doomed Necromancer. Sacrifices itself to return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Another card that helps us cheat on the reanimation process, get higher mana cost cards than we should normally. Animate Dead. An enchantment, just always been a good card and always will be. Another great target for Eternal Witness. One card that I find is a little underrated is Life and Death. I could see any number of other reanimation spells being put in here, but a lot of the times if I am rushing someone, I don't want a reanimation spell to be dead, and so that's why Life and Death is good. You're paying 1 additional mana for the reanimate, but due to my meta, I prefer the flexibility. And then finally, this one kind of bleeds over into the Finisher's Living Death. This is an absolutely gorgeous old border promo. If you don't know, Living Death swaps all the creatures on the battlefield for all the creatures in your graveyard. If you can in this deck, you can easily just sacrifice all your stuff, put it in the graveyard, and then just get everything back. And that's generally a way to just immediately win the game on the spot. This is easily the largest section, but we're going to start at the bottom of the mana curve with Stitcher Supplier. So this section is what I like to call just gain access to cards. This mills us when it enters the battlefield or dies. Just such a good card. Skull Clamp. This beauty here is broken beyond belief, and most of our early drops are 1/1s. So this is a fantastic... it's essentially a sack outlet in this deck. Next up is Satyr Wayfinder. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put a land from among them into your hand, rest into your graveyard. It doesn't matter that we're only getting a land from them. As I said, reanimating creatures is no problem in this deck. It's kind of its whole point. Another card that gets cards back but also puts cards in our graveyard is Golgari Thug. When it dies, you get a creature from your graveyard on top of your library and then just straight up dredge 4. Another thing to note, yet another 1/1. Skull Clamp is easily one of the best cards in this deck. Diabolic Intent. The reason that I'm going for this over Demonic Tutor is because of that clause of sacrificing a creature. The more sack outlets in this deck early on, especially at 2 mana, is just far better for this deck. Searching a library for card, putting to your hand, then shuffle your library makes it essentially identical to Demonic Tutor in this deck with that exception, which is just better. And then there's this beauty, Survival of the Fittest. Choose and discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and then put into your hand, shuffle your library. Creature Tutor puts cards into our graveyard. What more could you want? This helps us tutor up any combo pieces if we need, or any just haymakers that'll absolutely finish the game off. Now this one isn't necessarily one that puts cards into our graveyard, however, it does give us huge card advantage. You scry 2, draw 2 cards. Sure, you lose 2 life, but that's not important. The fact that you're scrying 2 and drawing 2 cards is enough already. Buried Alive. Search your library for 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, shuffle your library. They essentially just search your library for 3 cards and put it into your hand in this deck. I'm currently testing out Acolyte of Affliction. Enters the battlefield, mill 2, and then you get a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. This, I'm not too sure, but so far this seems to be working out. So I think this might take more testing to see just how good it is. Mindrack Demon. In the early builds of this deck, I use this card a lot to just straight up mill a bunch and create a giant flying blocker. The Delirium is not difficult to achieve in this deck, so I kind of like this card. It's a bit of a pet card, plus the artwork is fantastic. Next up is, oh god, this card is amazing. Rankle, Master of Pranks. Such a dumb name, but oh my god, this card is stupid. Flying and haste, all of these options are bad for your opponent and good for you. And he just synergizes so well with so many different cards in this deck. It's unreal. Next up, Final Parting. Puts a card into your graveyard and one to your hand. It essentially just sets up a combo. All you really need. perfect tutor. Another perfect tutor is Sidisi Undead Vizier. I mentioned Diabolic Intent, sacking a creature, and tutoring up a card is just one of the best card pseudo advantage engines in the deck. So this is just another one. That's just another Diabolic Intent, essentially. Underrealm Lich. This just replaces your draws with milling. It's fantastic, and it's at 5 mana, which is perfect on the curve for us. Next up, Harvester of Souls. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. That includes your opponents, so if I'm making my opponent sack stuff, I'm just going to get so many darn cards. It's amazing. And then this beauty. This version is Japanese, but essentially what she reads is, whenever something you control dies, you get to draw a card. Create a zombie that's just fodder. Everyone sacrifices 2 creatures, and then -9 is just basically win the game. This card is just so disgusting in this deck, and the artwork is unbelievably gorgeous. So, this section that's just finishers. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, classic card. If you can bring this card back multiple times in a game, you're gonna shoot ahead so far. Zulaport Cutthroat. All I need to say is whenever a creature you control dies, you get to drain someone. It's gonna happen easily like 20 or 30 times a game. Sir Conrad the Grim is another version of that, but he's just far better. He mills you whenever something goes to your graveyard, leaves your graveyard. Whenever something in this deck does anything, he pings people. Poison Tip Archer, another card where whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. In this situation, having each opponent lose a life is just disgusting. And then the classic that is Blood Artist. Another creature dies, drain someone. Nothing more to say there. And then this is kind of the Haymaker section of the deck. We got Avenger of Zendikar. This is a great top of the curve reanimation target. It's been tested in Commander for many years, and boy oh boy does this thing work. The only thing I'd consider replacing this with is Massacre Worm, but that's only in cases when just you don't really have a whole lot of lands, and so I could see you having either of those here. I mentioned combos. There's a few other cards that combo with this, but Macaeus the Unhallowed is, even without the combos, just a fantastic card in this deck, giving all other non-human creatures you control Undying. That is an insane amount of cards in this deck. Most of the ones that you didn't even notice were like elves or zombies or vampires. So, and then we have Vilis, Broker of Blood, essentially the Gristlebrand for Commander. I mean, you lose life all the time. Why not? And in fact, one thing I noticed was this beautiful thing, Blood Artist. Whenever he or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life. I found that, you can just target yourself and lose a life, gain a life. No harm, no foul, but you get to draw a card whenever something dies. So just another way to draw an absurd amount of cards. Azoni Thousand-Eyed, kind of another version of Avenger of Zendikar, but more tailored to this style of commander deck, creating a black and green insect for each creature in your graveyard, plus she's gives you a sack outlet. Everything this deck wants to reanimate on the top end. And then we've got Drod Golgari Lich Lord. This guy's been persistent commander since he was released. He reanimates himself, sacks other creatures, and then just gets bigger for each creature in your graveyard. And then Mr. Razaketh, yet another tutor sack outlet, and you pay 2 life. That counts as life loss, so Vilis loves it. Before we get into the removal, I want to just add in a couple of other cards that sort of fit into the other categories, but really didn't. This is Spore Frog. He is a freaking nuisance. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Reanimating him is no tough feat at all. He's easily entering the battlefield like hundreds of times a game. Journey to Eternity. Whenever enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control. And then Journey to Eternity gets transformed into a land that just straight up reanimates things. I don't understand why this card isn't played more in Golgari decks. It's amazing to put on your commander. And then, yeah. We got Grimflayer. I could see cutting this for another more efficient filter spell. The Delirium isn't necessarily something you really need to get, but it is a good early filterer. Plus, I mean, that artwork's really, really badass. Lesser Masticore. It's a colorless creature with Persist that discards a card. Perfect early drop. Combos with Mikaeus. I can't say anything more about this card that hasn't already been said for combos. Grave Pact. Okay, I can see replacing this for Dictate of Erebos easily. However, Grave Pact's a bit more nostalgic, plus I need more things at 4 CMC in this deck, so that's why I chose this one. However, if you have Dictate of Erebos, I could see that being arguably better for this deck. Next up, we got Spider Spawning. This little menace has flashback, creates a 1/1 spider for each creature token in your graveyard. It's a lot like Izoni in terms of making just an absurd amount of tokens. And of course, we got the two classics, Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves. In this deck, I would suggest having both because you generally want to put the Greaves on your commander and then Swiftfoot Boots on whichever big guy like Villas or whatever you end up making the finisher. Finally is the removal. This one is, you could tailor this however you want. There's no particular need for any one way. I chose Heapdoll for this deck because it's an early sacrifice outlet that can, self-sacrificer that can get rid of my opponent's Dakmor Salvage or something like that, something in the graveyard that's very troublesome. Another early sacrificer is Caustic Caterpillar, destroys an artifact or enchantment. Exactly what this deck needs. Next is Vampire Hexmage. I'm mainly using this because of the advent of, what I'm trying to say, ability counters from Ikoria and stuff that have popped up in my playgroup. Plus, there's always the occasional Teferi that I absolutely despise, so she comes in real handy for that. Next up is Plague Crafter. You could do Merciless Executioner, Flashback Marauder, whatever you want to do in this slot, but I do often prefer this guy because he can also hit Planeswalkers. That one's just personal preference. Putrefy, artifact or creature. I mean, it's Putrefy. We all know it's good. Ashes to Ashes. This is one that not everyone seems to know is good. It's important to note that Ashes to Ashes exiles 2 non-artifact creatures. Now, that may seem narrow, and the fact that it does 5 damage to you seems bad, but keeping in mind, Villas is the, go-to reanimation target, so that 5 damage is essentially just completely mitigated. Plus, exiling 2 creatures for the price of 3 mana is a fantastic deal. And we got Death Sprout. It destroys a creature. It searches you for a land. you can kill your own stuff early on to ramp yourself. It's fantastic. Acidic Slime, destroying an artifact or enchantment or land. This card is disgusting, and I hate it, but I also love it. And then we got Shriek Maw, destroying things, evoking. This is a classic in Commander. How can you not include it? And then finally, I want to talk about why I chose this over so many of the other different options. Yes, I know that Toxic Deluge is better, but it's important to remember that in this deck, we don't particularly care about our stuff dying. That's not a problem at all. So, killing everything in one foul swoop, as you could replace this with something else. Nothing wrong there. But yeah, that's the Meren of Clan Neltoth. I can't wait to play it against you guys at some point.